Hi, I'm Polly Pattullo, the publisher of Papillote Press, and I'm here in Dominica, aptly known as the nature island of the Caribbean. Dominica is also the Caribbean home of Papillote Press. Welcome to this edition of En Papillote. This is the terrific new historical novel by Lawrence Scott, the award-winning Trinidadian writer. Dangerous Freedom, weaving fact and fiction, explores the life of Dido Belle, the mixed-race child who was brought up in a stately home in North London, Kenwood House, then at the end of the 18th century, the home of Lord Mansfield, her great-uncle, who was also Lord Chief Justice. Dangerous Freedom explores that great deception exercised by the powerful on the powerless, and Dido in this book explores her own traumas of childhood and addresses the fears of adulthood. I wanted to publish this book because, as in all of Lawrence Scott's writing, he probes beneath the surface of history and finds the more complex answers to the historical facts. It is a moving and radical story. Here, Lawrence Scott reads an extract from the opening pages of Dangerous Freedom. You will enjoy it.
Hello, I'm Lawrence Scott and I'm going to read from my new novel Dangerous Freedom by Papillote Press. It's my third book done by Papillote Press and my wonderful editor Polly Pattullo. In Dangerous Freedom, I'm trying to redress the image and historical sense we have of Dido Elizabeth Belle in art, film and literature. And I question the sketchy history we have of her as an historical figure through my fiction. And I want to try and alter the psychological and political perspectives we have. I hope that the novel can add to our understanding of a pain that remains just below the surface of contemporary life. I'm going to read from the very opening of the novel. At this time of her life, Elizabeth Davinier was living in a modest house on Randy Street. It was the winter of 1802, and the last autumn lingered in the fallen leaves. Another war was stirring. She felt that she was in a fortunate state, though not with all her freedoms. Many of those had been threatened or never given, but nevertheless she was satisfied now with her husband and her sons, and mostly occupied with her memories, which on evenings came gently, as evenings could. She recalled when she was a small girl, swaying in a hammock in a different climate with its brief sunset, her mother telling her the story of her life. "It's 4 years since you were born on your father's ship. We up and down the islands. Remember the year, child, 1761. We go have to write it down one day." The ribbons of light then were mixed with the shadows on the pitch-pine floor of the porch. They swung to and fro in a silence filled with the breaking of the waves on the nearby shore and the scratching sound of palm branches in the breeze. "A long, long time ago," as her mother would say in her sing-song voice. That was in Pensacola, the British port in Florida. It was a geography that her father had taught Elizabeth with his maps, pointing to where he had bought her mother from the auction block and then put her in his house, which was on the front with the tall ships moored between the shore and Santa Rosa Island. Light was different here on Randy Street, not far from the banks of the River Thames, where the creeks, water meadows and marshes lay just beyond the streets of Pimlico, choked in spring and summer with nettles. It had been her home for these last 8 years. What was even more different now was her name, that she was called Elizabeth, or Lizzie, by her husband John. He would keep to formalities in public, calling her Mrs. Davinier, but he called her Lizzie when he greeted her with kisses and cuddles, whispering, "Lizzie, Lizzie, Lizzie, darling," like a young lover. How sweet it was now to have his name in marriage, a proper surname, a real name, a free name, not that silly name, Dido, not that slave name. Her sons called her Mama. She was fortunate. She had to keep telling herself, despite the loss of her mother. Some of her more gentle memories and her mother's stories of Pensacola were filled with names, just sounds now, like those of the birds that sang in the trees. Creek and Chickasaw, Choctaw, and the name that made them laugh aloud, almost falling out of the hammock, Chief Cowkeeper. Elizabeth listened more intently when her mother started to tell a harder story. We find them people here. When we reached by boat, and they dropped the anchor in the harbour, we so exhausted, so starved and thirsty, and not daring to think that we might step upon land again. Them chains, such a part of we limbs, that not to have them shackled to each other, to our ankles and to the boards, don't seem usual and ordinary at all, when we come to stand upon the dry ground and have to walk, stumbling like we are accustomed on the deck of that terrible ship. Elizabeth enjoyed making up her mother's voice. She wrote it as she heard her speak. To find her on her tongue was to keep her close. To try it on the page was to keep her even closer and not to lose her.